Okay, good day to all who may be watching this. And my name is Xiankun Lu, and people call me Lu. I'm the CEO of the Friends of Multilateralism Group, based in Geneva, a WTO think tank focusing on WTO reform. Like we did for MC12 of the WTO, and we're going to launch a series of so-called MC13 interview on specific points around this meeting. And today I'm most glad to have our member and also former EU Trade Commissioner Cecilia with us as the first of this interview series. And today we are going to focus more on the general context of the MC13 and its WTO reform. It's about the trade and the geopolitics. Cecilia, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm going to start by quoting your successor, Mr. Dombrovskis, his recent article in Financial Times, which says, I quote, "Now, at a time of geopolitical tensions, political uncertainty, and the growing weaponization of trade, the value of the multilateral cooperation within WTO is greater than ever," end of quote. So in his article, at the very beginning, he mentioned three challenges. And the first one is geopolitical tensions, which is, of course, the focus of our discussion today. So, of course, he also mentions that we need more multilateral collaboration. But what's your take on this? Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Louis. It's a pleasure being with you. And I very much agree with Valdis Dombrovskis, of course, because what we have seen recently is the increasing weaponization of trade, sort of geopolitics being put before efficiency and wealth, and pushed to achieve other means than trade via just trade. We hear talks about decoupling, de-risking, friendshoring, homeshoring, reshoring, etc. And part of this is to protect and secure value chains, which is normal and healthy. But part of this is also to mark political content or discontent, which is more complicated. I think it all started in modern times with President Trump saying that trade wars are good and they're easy to win. And when he started to introduce tariffs, motivating them on national security, not for economic reasons or trade as we have rules to, but this was a national security and on friends and allies such as Europe and others, and also introducing a lot of punitive measures on China. And of course, China has also used trade as geopolitics, punishing countries who have done things that they're not happy with, Australia, Lithuania, etc. And also with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I think Europe had a very brutal wake up. Of course, the war and the atrocities that's committed in Ukraine, but also realizing how dependent we were on Russian oil and gas and how Russia used this for geopolitical reasons, which led to a whole new rethinking in the energy field, but also a realization that there are other vulnerable materials that we are very dependent on, critical minerals, for instance, where there's a huge dependent in the West on China, who is owning or processing many of the critical materials that we need for the green transition, nickel, cobalt, magnesium, and so on. And this has also led to Europe setting up, economic security strategies where trade has become a very important element. And in all this, with all the crises, the wars, the climate challenges, the whole world would so much need global cooperation. And yet institutions such as the WTO, but also United Nations and others are weaker than in decades. So this is a very sad irony. And those of us who still believe that multilateralism and global rules is something really worth fighting for, see challenges and a lot of obstacles today. So let's hope that eventually there will be other times coming, and this is what we will discuss today. But right now, geopolitics is sort of blocking progress on multilateralism, on internationalism, and on common rules, which is very sad.
Thanks, Cecilia. There's a lot to take from what you said. I think, of course, Trump said by many is signaling the start of this kind of geopolitical tensions outwards. All kinds of words, like you said, decoupling and other things are being created, friendshoring, so on and so forth. You have talked a lot also about Trump, US, and China, and other, and also just to complete the picture. Probably is that to a certain extent, the EU is also kind of challenging on some of its measures, as some call it, like unilateral measures like CBAM and deforestation, which, as I think said by one developing country minister, as kind of a kind of emergence of new green protectionism. There's something arguable there, but I think there's also a concern there to that. And as you said, and also said by many others, that we all value the WTO and as the key platform for international cooperation, and which may through its kind of development of new rules, be it hard or soft, and then kind of dialogue, communication, people working together. And then, but this geopolitics is very much, if I could say so, hindering that kind of appeal, or the realization of that kind of objective appealed by many. So, what do you think about these challenges of geopolitics on the WTO and its reform?
Well, it is making it much more difficult because national security has become the prime objective instead of sort of joint security and joint solutions. And with the US violating WTO rules, China also not following it, and at least the European Union, certain measures are being questioned in the WTO. You refer to CBAM. Then, of course, all the other members wonder, why should we follow the rules if the big ones are not? So this risks to become a vicious circle. Instead of what we would need is more than ever sit together and discuss, so what do we do with subsidies? Subsidies could be a good thing if market can't deliver, but you need to make them in a way that you don't hurt others. If we want to introduce carbon fees or carbon taxes, which is per se a very good thing, how do we do it so we do not create green protectionism or green colonialism and more trade tensions? We would have needed something like WTO to watch over us to make sure that we can do this in a fair way. But this is now, for the time being, made impossible by the big players not wanting to give that power to another organization. And that is so sad, because national security is totally dominating the trade area right now. So those of us who still believe in it, together with, I would say, the majority of countries in the world, the middle powers and others, who still think that you need to solve these kind of tensions within the WTO, we will need to make an even bigger effort to see if we can find ways forward while waiting for US and China to sort of come back.
Yeah, thanks. That is very interesting because I also said many times that the big guys are not really leading, or they say they are leading, but they are doing many things which, again, not only against each other, but which also undermine a lot the multilateral cooperation we are expecting from them and within the WTO. Here, there are two questions we should discuss. Probably the first one is that does this mean the end of kind of leadership role by not only the big three, maybe big five, big seven, big whatever it is, like you said, the big guys? So are there still scope for the cooperation on one thing or the other, which would probably help ease the tension between them? The other thing, like you called middle powers, or most often we say in the WTO, middle grounders.
Middle grounders, yes.
Yeah, like in New
Maybe
Zealand.
Maybe it's a better word, you're right. Yes.
Yeah. New Zealand and Singapore, Australia, and others, which are quite, for me, with my many 2 decades of as a WTO practitioner, which was something quite new in recent years. They began to step up, more proactive, be it on some multilateral initiatives, or on some plurilateral initiative within the WTO, they are the ones who are either initiating, or they are convening, or they are trying to play kind of a bridge building thing between different members with different ideas. So two questions. First, is there any scope for big guys to work together, or at least to not to work against each other and against the WTO? The second thing is that where would this kind of emergence of middle grounders, more proactive role, is it a kind of new type of leadership we are seeing in the system?
Well, it's a very interesting question and hard to answer, of course. I think that from the US side, which is ironic because the US were sort of instrumental in creating GATT and later WTO and the institutions after the Second World War, and they have, they've gained a lot nationally, but they've also played a very important leadership role. But now with the elections coming in, I think on a short-term basis, we cannot really expect a big American engagement in the WTO. Which is sad, but I think we have to assume this. Possibly after the election, depending who gets elected, and if that president doesn't choose to withdraw totally from WTO, and if the US doesn't engage, I think China will not either, because they're sort of watching each other. They need to be around the same table. I mean, the European Union, and you refer to my friend and successor Valdis Dombrovskis, he is very. And the EU is very committed to multilateralism. Maybe you can criticize individual actions that the European Union has taken, but we in the European Union still very much want to reform and have worked with middle grounders in the Ottawa Group, but also in other contexts, taking the initiative with some developing countries to this trade ministers for green trade. I think it's called, it has probably an acronym that I don't remember. So I think the middle grounders, you refer to some of them, but a bigger group of them together with the European Union, I think they should sit together and try to do as much as possible with all those who want to, in a sort of plurilateral agreement. For instance, the ad hoc system for the appellate body, it's called the MPIA, where China is a member, and Australia and Japan and several others. I think there are like 30 countries, and then the whole of EU. It's not a permanent thing, but at least it has delivered judgment in a few cases. So I think we need to work with what's there, with those who are willing, being totally transparent and open for everybody, of course, but at least to keep the machinery going until hopefully in maybe a year or so, the US and China feel ready to come back. Yeah. And China is, of course, working. They've been very active in the plurilateral agreement on investment facilitation for developing countries.
Thank you. Just compliment what you said, maybe a word on China's leadership role, simply because I'm Chinese and I've been working as a Chinese official for many years. The thing when people are saying that when US was quitting from the WTO leadership role, and then China should be stepping in to play that role. And starting from 2013, China's leaders did say that they will play that kind of leadership role as expected by the international community. But my kind of nuanced explanation to the Western friends is that don't expect the Euro leadership you would see from, like in the past, from US and the EU and China, because of its culture and its history, and also its way of engaging. China is very much playing that kind of quiet role behind the scene, sometimes, of course, in the front line, but very not like the big bang thing that let's do it and then get people on board. But it's more like quiet talking, and what I would call is more collective leadership role, working with others instead of single-handed trying to play that role. So that's a word I'm trying. The EU is very interesting, because when we talked a few years ago about this leadership role and the change of the situation, I always say that the EU should be playing or working with the US and China in between, because as we discussed the geopolitical tension, they started from US and China. So that kind of thing, I think the EU is still trying to find a way to work on it. Okay. That would be something we need more efforts and I think from the EU in the future. Of course, middle grounders, I think they are doing that also together with the EU on many issues like service, domestic regulation, and others, which we're going to probably discuss. But the other thing is that before when we work in the next few years on this, be it among the big players, be it among big players and middle grounders, and we don't forget about other less advanced developing countries and LDCs. How we always say this word out of kind of deficit of confidence among members. And for many years we have been talking, and we said we need to rebuild that. And I don't think we have seen that already there. There's still a lot of mistrust and a lot of things going on which undermines that kind of efforts to rebuild the confidence. Especially if I could use the example of the China-US bilateral, what I once joke about this is a kind of new form of martial arts, is that you have your right hand punching each other into the face, and then your left hand trying to say, okay, let's work on climate change, let's work on this and security and Russia-Ukraine conflict and so on and so forth. So that's something we don't know. But coming back to what a focus of our discussion, within the WTO, what do you think we should be doing? I mean, to help the members, including the big guys, to rebuild this kind of confidence in the long run ahead?
Well, that's the $1 million question, of course, because trust cannot be commanded. It has to be deserved and earned. And of course, if some countries are turning their back from WTO or violating WTO rules or publicly declaring that WTO is not a priority and we don't care about the rules that are there, it's very hard to build trust. So trust has to be built by countries sitting together and doing compromises. I give and I take. And thereby, I mean, that's a very old rule in politics in general. You need to give and take, and you need to be able to listen and to understand what are the demands and the requests and the red lines of others. And if the US, for instance, doesn't want to be in that group for the moment, well, let's gather those who want to. That's why I think that the short-term solution for WTO is more plurilateral agreements or groups of countries who think, okay, we should go forward. We want to do this on plastics or on green trade or on fisheries or on what have you. And showing that cooperation is actually something that is concrete, that is including both middle grounders, big countries, small countries, developed, non-developed countries, and that we do it together for all of us, for the common good. And if you manage to create these kinds of communities that can actually start delivering something concrete, you will build trust. And then eventually others might join you a little bit later saying that this is a good group. They're actually doing something good. But you need to be able to show that generosity, to say that this is not only what I want, this is what I think could be good for all of us. And we are willing and also to step back a bit and listening to you. And when WTO does that, it can create fantastic agreements, but we've seen too little of it lately. And I know that Dr. Ngozi is trying really hard, but also if you compare WTO to other international organizations, I mean, the Secretariat have very little powers, and they have quite little means as well, little budget, and so on. So it has to be done by individual member states working together as well. And I don't have a quick formula to solve it. It's only hard work by sitting together and trying to find a way forward. But you've been in this for so many years, Lu, so you know that better than anybody, how hard it can be and how fantastic it can be when you actually find an agreement.
Yeah, I think you well said it exactly. That you cannot only do whatever you want, but you don't sit at the table. I mean, if you have to sit at the table, ideally with all 164, no, 166 now, with the 2 new members all together, or sometimes when some members either are not yet ready to be at the table, or for other reasons, as you said, that they have to turn away for political reasons from the table, we have to accept that. But we need those who are willing to have to be sitting at the table, talking not only to each other at the table, but at the same time continue to talk with the people who are not yet at the table, to keep feeding them with the information about what is happening. Sometimes it's good information to persuade them to join the initiative, like many plurilaterals. But the other way is sometimes, as you said, that if you are turning away, we're doing it without you. But you know what we are doing. One excellent example would be this replacement for the paralyzed dispute settlement is MPIA, because it's exactly that almost everyone without US. I think that's probably one of the things which mobilized the US willingness to start this informal dialogue on dispute settlement reform, and then right now going on and hopefully with something at the MC13. I think those are the things.
Yes, and you, as you say, you have to see what you can gain by participating, but also what you lose out if you're not there. Because when I speak to the American business, for instance, they really want WTO to function because they think it is a forum where, you know, fair play is generally accepted. And if it's not, it's a forum where you can make your complaints and then, you know, countries adjust. So they would very much like the appellate body and the WTO to function, because they see that others are going out without them, and there are deals being made there that they cannot not access. So that's what has to be done. And what we've seen lately is also that WTO, together with the institutions such as OECD, IMF, and World Bank, are working together to produce joint statistics and joint reports and mapping the sort of global wave of subsidies that we see all over now. And also sort of raising some joint warnings, for instance, if friendshoring, meaning that you sort of disconnect your supply chains from countries where you don't like the regime or for whatever reason. If that was to taken to its extreme, we would divide the world in 2 parts. And that would have enormous effects on the global economy. I think Dr. Ngozi said that at least 5% loss of the global GDP. And that's on average, meaning that is maybe 3 times higher in Africa. And this is what risks happening if we do this. It will have very high costs for the world. And I think if all the institutions that, you know, people in general trust, they are full of very qualified people, say the same message, this is also something that we should support and start spreading more.
Yeah, and Dr. Ngozi, the WTO Director General, has been repeatedly saying that, always mentioning the WTO research and their analysis about this 5% GDP loss. Of course, as you said, it's not only just 5%, which is already big, but behind it means loss of investment, loss of jobs, family revenue, everything. So this is huge, and I agree with that very much. If we are dislinked with each other and then stop trading or investing into each other. Another thing coming about WTO reform is right now the MC13 is going on, and which is supposed to end this evening in Abu Dhabi. DG, she said one thing at the first press conference of this ministerial, which I quote, "We need to repair the WTO and make it fit for purpose." And then before that, in 2021, she was also saying something somewhere that, which I quote, "If the WTO did not exist, you would have to invent it." So which means that WTO as it is now, it is very important. You cannot work without it or live without it. But on the other hand, we need to repair it or reform it and make it for fit for purpose, which means that we need to update the WTO. And where do we start? And what do we expect from this ministerial?
Well, all the ministerials I've been to, the deals are always made at the very end, and it's usually on overtime, meaning that if the conference is supposed to end on Tuesday, the deals are made on Thursday. So hopefully extending it a little bit is a good sign that there's something cooking. People are not ready to go home yet. So I very much hope that there can be an agreement to prolong the e-commerce moratorium, because that has been good for the world, and recent research showed that it's been particularly good for small companies in rural areas in developing countries who have been able to develop their small, maybe only one part or family businesses. So this would be good if at least the fisheries process could be taken forward, so that there's no backlash to it. We cannot solve all the questions probably, but at least see that there is a way forward. That would be good as well. You mentioned already that we have 2 new members, meaning that the Comoros and East Timor, meaning that WTO is still attractive for very small countries and small economies, but they still want to be in. And I think 95% of all trade in the world is still done under WTO rules. Now, it is alarming that countries are violating the rules, but it's still, I mean, there are rules to be broken because we have set them, and that's a good thing. So I don't think we can just, start with a huge reform package and hope that after 10 days everything will be fit for purpose. So we have to start where it's possible. Small steps forward, both on substance, maybe trying to come up with some slightly more efficient ways of working, looking at transparency and the different working groups. Maybe there are too many, maybe we could abolish a few and be a bit more efficient, building on what we have to show that step by step we are at least moving forward. There's no big big bang reform that could be credible, and we also need to take into account that the US electoral cycle is there, and whether we like it or not. So hopefully when this MC closes, at least there will be a few points pointing in the right direction, and then we can build it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia. I think we are already seeing some encouraging results. Like you say, the 2 new members. We got a service domestic regulation, which will be
that's very good.
legally effective very soon. And then we already agreed before MC13 this so-called LDC graduation decision. And of course, as you say, that we also need to see hopefully a permanent e-commerce moratorium, fisheries too, maybe agriculture, and also development and other things to come up. But I agree with you very much that even we have high expectation for MC13, because WTO reform was launched at MC12. So people are saying that we should see MC13 as the first reform ministerial. But the story won't end here with the MC13. It's going to be a long process in the long-term future to look at many things from the past. I mean, we say Doha is dead, but Doha issues are still very much alive, which needs to be tackled. But also some new issues, climate change, sustainability, development, and COVID, and many other things that we need to look at in the long-term future to progressively, incrementally trying to provide a trade answer to all these challenges of this. So the thing coming back maybe after the MC13, and we will see what results would be like. But what do you think that your last word as kind of message towards the international community about this trade geopolitical situation and also the WTO reform on the way forward? Your conclusion remark to our audience.
Well, I would say that geopolitics, they're of course real, and there are security concerns to be taken into account, and we cannot turn away from that. But common rules and common institutions are there for purpose, and they were very accurate when they were created once, but they're still even more accurate now, because if we want to save this planet, if we want to make sure that we can invest in fighting inequalities within and between countries, that we can have common measures to deal with the climate change, with health issues, for instance, we need to have a certain set of common rules. And if we don't have them, it's not just that some poor countries are losing out. It's the loss for the whole world. Maybe not on short term, but on a longer term, we will find out that we are actually fighting each other by just closing our borders mentally and focusing on our own national security. So we need to. WTO is not perfect. Yes, it has a lot of problems and challenges, and they will not be solved even on Sunday night if it goes on. But small steps forward and engagement and showing the leadership that is required. I would really urge countries to do that, because the alternative is a total chaos. And even if the strongest may look as strong winners of that, in the end they will not, because we're in all this together.
Yeah, no, that's very sensible message to our audience. I also agree that unless we work on these common challenges with a common solution, and in the long-term future, every problem would be individual and personal, because nobody can expect it, be rich or poor, be big or small, and whatever is going to be heavy on every one of us. So with that, I would like to thank you very much, Cecilia. We're going to of course, a word to the audience. We're going to have a series of interviews in the next few days on specific issues around WTO reform, MC13, and some of the things have been done or not done, and we will so stay with us, and we look forward to see you next time. And thanks a lot to you again, Cecilia.
And thank you, Lou. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.